Hey, I'm Christy, and this is the moment my family crossed the line. My own parents told me, "It's over, you're not our daughter anymore." They sold my childhood room, and yet, they never expected me to fight back. But I did something they never saw coming. I bought the house. The house they stole from me, and now, they'll pay the price. What happens next will shock you. The dinner table felt colder than it should have been. I sat at the far end, my plate of food untouched. The conversations happening around me seemed distant, like a soundtrack playing in the background of a movie I wasn't a part of. Silas, my older brother, sat across from me, talking animatedly to Mom about the latest real estate deal. I wasn't sure if they even noticed I was there. Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe it was easier that way. Portland's early summer had never felt this unwelcoming. The warm breeze outside the window did nothing to cool the suffocating tension in the air. I had come here, to this house that used to feel like home, hoping for some semblance of connection. Instead, I found myself staring at a meal that tasted like cardboard, my mind miles away. Mom, Lorraine, kept the conversation light, almost robotic. She smiled that tight smile that never reached her eyes, occasionally tossing a word my way, but nothing too deep. I'd spent years trying to break through that wall, but today, it felt even thicker. Silas, on the other hand, was so absorbed in whatever new venture he was discussing that he barely even glanced in my direction. The more they ignored me, the more I felt invisible, and the more I realized just how long I had been ignored. "Christy, you okay?" Mom's voice sliced through my thoughts. I snapped back to reality, startled by her sudden attention. "Yeah, just tired," I muttered, offering a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. She nodded, not really listening, and resumed her conversation with Silas. That was it. No more questions. No attempts to understand how I felt. No probing about my life, my world. Just a polite, distant silence. My heart felt heavy, a weight I couldn't shake off. The distance between us wasn't just in the room, it was in the air, the way they spoke to me like I was a stranger who had once belonged, but not anymore. The realization hit me like a slap in the face. I wasn't part of their world anymore. My family, the very people who should have cared the most, had just moved on without me. The room around me seemed to close in as I overheard Silas talking to Mom about the sale of the house. I felt my stomach churn. "They're selling my room," I overheard Silas say, his voice casual, as if it was just another business transaction. My room, the one place that had once felt like mine. The one place I could retreat to when the world outside felt too much. The place where I had spent hours, days, months, years of my childhood, seeking comfort and peace. Now, it was just a line item on some list. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking before I could stop it. Silas and Mom both turned to me, their expressions unreadable. I wasn't prepared for the cold indifference that followed. "You're not even here," Silas said, almost dismissively. "Why keep it? It's just taking up space." My mind raced, my breath caught in my chest. "What about me?" I whispered, barely audible. "You don't need it," Mom said. Her words clipped, and I could hear the finality in them. My heart shattered as I sat there, frozen in disbelief. This was my family, my blood, and they had already erased me from their plans. My room, my childhood, my past gone, as if it never mattered, as if I never mattered. The argument came crashing in like a wave, but the damage had already been done. After dinner, I couldn't sit still any longer. I found myself standing in the hallway, then outside my childhood room, staring at the closed door. That now felt like a prison. The walls I had once leaned on now felt cold, unwelcoming. "Mom, Silas, why?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of hurt and anger. "Why are you doing this to me?" Lorraine crossed her arms, her face cold. "We're doing what's best for the family," she said, her voice too calm, too controlled. "Best for the family?" I couldn't help the laugh that escaped me, bitter and hollow. "What about me, Mom? I'm part of this family too. You don't live here anymore, Christy," Silas added, his tone flat, detached. "It's not like you ever come around. We're better off without the house taking up space." I could feel my heart race as my anger began to boil over. "You can't just throw me away like that. You can't just decide I'm not part of this anymore." Mom's eyes flickered for just a moment, but it was enough. It was the moment I realized she wasn't going to fight for me. She had made up her mind long ago. "No one's throwing you away," Lorraine said, voice soft, but cutting. We have to move forward, Christy. Move forward." I couldn't understand what she meant. This was the family I had grown up with, and they were throwing me out like I was some inconvenience. I stood there, fighting back tears, but I wouldn't let them see my weakness. Not now. Not when I finally understood just how little I meant to them. I spent the night in my old room, staring at the faded wallpaper, the bed I used to lie in. It felt like a ghost of the past, a memory of a time when I thought I was loved. Now, it felt like a tomb. I kept thinking about everything I had tried to do to make things right. All the dinners, the phone calls, the visits, all the ways I had tried to prove I was worth their time. And yet, here I was, a stranger in my own family. The pain inside me felt unbearable. But as the hours dragged on, something shifted. A spark of something stronger than sorrow. A flicker of resolve. Maybe it was time to stop begging for their approval. Maybe it was time to stop trying to make them love me. Maybe it was time to build my own future. Without them, I didn't know what that future looked like yet, but I knew I wouldn't let them erase me without a fight. As I stood up from the bed, looking around at the remnants of my childhood, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them take this from me, not without a fight. I would reclaim my place in this family, or at least in my own story. I was done being their silent victim. I wouldn't let them win. They thought I was invisible, but buying that house was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let them erase me without a fight. I sat at my kitchen table, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. My family had just made it clear that I didn't belong anymore. They'd sold my childhood room without telling me, wiped me off the family's plans like a speck of dust. But that night, after the shouting and the tears, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them control my story. Not anymore. The house had always been more than just a building to me. It was the place where I'd spent countless hours feeling safe, where I had built memories with a family that had slowly faded away from me. The thought of someone else taking it, tearing it down, selling it off, it crushed me. But in that moment, I realized it didn't have to be that way. It was mine too, and I would fight to keep it. I grabbed my phone and started looking up real estate listings in Portland. My stomach twisted as I clicked on the house's page, the place that had seen so many years of my life. It was listed. It was real. And if I wanted it, I could make it mine. But first, I needed to figure out how. The idea struck me like a bolt of lightning. What if I bought it? What if, instead of just letting them erase me, I took control of my own future? It was crazy. Ridiculous, even. But what did I have to lose? Everything had already been taken from me, so why not? I sat there for hours, calculating, running numbers in my head. My inheritance that they thought they had taken from me, I could access that now. My savings from the last few years of work, if I stretched it just right, I could make this happen. I wasn't just thinking about buying a house. I was thinking about buying my freedom. The next day, I stood outside the real estate agent's office, staring at the sign. My hands shook as I adjusted the strap of my purse. I had never made a decision this big in my life. The woman inside would help me with the paperwork, the details, the logistics, but I knew deep down that this wasn't just about buying property. It was about reclaiming something more valuable than walls and floors. It was about taking back control over the life my family had tried to rip away from me. I walked inside. "Hi, I'm Christy," I said to the agent behind the counter. "I'm interested in buying the house on East Broadway." She looked up, clearly a little surprised. "The old house on the corner?" she asked, her tone neutral, but a bit skeptical. "That's the one," I said, my voice steady. "I want to make an offer." I explained my plan, step by step, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. The agent was polite, but I could see she was calculating in her head. I wasn't the kind of buyer who usually came in with a clear vision. But I was here now, and I was going to see it through. After a long meeting, we worked through the financials. I was putting everything on the line. Every penny I had saved, every bit of inheritance I could pull together. The agent didn't blink, but I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I making a mistake? What if I couldn't keep up with the payments? What if I failed? But then I remembered something my dad used to tell me. If you want something, you don't wait for it to be given, take it. I hadn't understood it back then, but now? Now it made sense. I wasn't going to wait for anyone to give me permission to live my life. I was taking it. Later that week, my family started noticing the change in me. Silas was the first to bring it up. He came by the house after work, his face tight, clearly annoyed. "You're really going through with this, aren't you?" he asked, his voice flat, like he was talking to a child. "I'm buying the house," I said, my words firm. "I'm not just letting you sell it. You're making a mistake," Silas replied, crossing his arms. "You think you're going to fix everything by buying the house? You'll never be part of this family again if you do this." I didn't flinch. I'd already heard worse, and this was the last thing I would let him take from me. "You can't control me anymore, Silas," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "I don't need your approval." I saw his jaw tighten, but he didn't say anything else. It didn't matter. He couldn't intimidate me anymore. The argument didn't end there. Mom Lorraine was even worse. She called me later that night, her voice calm, but laced with that familiar manipulation I knew so well. "Christy," she said, "this is just a phase. You don't need to do this. We've sacrificed so much as a family, and now you're throwing it all away." "You didn't even ask me," I shot back, the anger bubbling up, but I tried to control it. "You made decisions about me, about my life, without even telling me. You think this is just a phase? This is my life, Mom. I'm not asking for permission anymore." "You don't understand," she said, her voice growing softer, almost sad. "This is what's best for the family." I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me anymore. She'd been doing it my whole life, twisting everything until I felt like I was the one in the wrong. But not this time. "I understand more than you think," I said. "And I'm done letting you make decisions for me." As I lay in bed that night, the anger still simmering, a quiet voice inside me whispered that this was the right choice. It didn't matter that they didn't understand. I had made my decision, and now I had to follow through. The next morning, the papers were signed. As I sat there, pen in hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't just buying a house. I was buying my future. I was buying my freedom. I wasn't going to let anyone erase me. The house had become more than just walls and windows to me. It was my refuge, my fortress. The renovation was not just about fixing it up, it was about me fixing myself. I could feel it in every brushstroke of paint, every wall I tore down, every piece of old furniture I replaced. This house was a blank canvas, and I was painting my future on it. I wasn't doing this for anyone but me. The days seemed to drag on, but there was a strange sense of peace in the mess. Each room I worked on, I felt like I was slowly erasing the past, the memories of a family that had turned its back on me. No more reminders of the cold dinners, the silence at the table, the unsaid words that had filled the house with tension. I was building a space that was mine, one where I didn't have to fight for space, for love, for recognition. I hired a contractor to help with the bigger projects, mainly tearing out the outdated kitchen and replacing the broken plumbing. It was a big step for me. Acknowledging that I needed help didn't feel like weakness. It felt like strength. Asking for help was something I had never done before. My family had never let me. But I had learned that I couldn't do it all alone. This was mine to rebuild, and I wasn't going to waste time trying to do it the old way. The contractor was a guy named Jerry. He was kind, but had a no-nonsense way about him. Every morning when he showed up, we got to work. There was something about the rhythm of the work, the constant motion of pushing the old out and bringing the new in, that made everything else fade into the background. It was just me in the house. It wasn't long before my family decided to visit. Of course, they didn't ask for my permission. No. They just showed up one afternoon, like they still had some claim over this place. I hadn't been expecting them, so when Lorraine and Silas stood at the door, I froze. They looked out of place in the freshly renovated space. Lorraine had that calculating look in her eyes like she was still trying to control everything, and Silas, as always, wore that smug expression. "Christy," Lorraine said, her voice dripping with condescension, "we need to talk. You really think buying this place is a good idea? It's just a house." I stared at her, heart pounding in my chest. "What do you want, Mom?" Silas stepped in, his presence cold, like a shadow. You need to sell it back. It's not worth what you're putting into it. We've all tried to tell you, but you're too stubborn to listen. It was like a slap in the face. How dare they? After everything they had done to me, they were still trying to control me, to tell me what I should do with my life. I clenched my fists, feeling that old familiar surge of anger. I'm not selling, I said, my voice sharp. I'm not going to let you dictate my life anymore. Lorraine's face tightened, but she didn't back down. You're making a huge mistake, Christy. You don't know what you're doing. No, I snapped. You don't know what I'm doing. I could feel the heat of the argument rising, my chest tight, but I wouldn't back down. Not anymore. Silas tried to throw money at me, as if that could fix everything. Take this. Let's just put this whole thing behind us. We'll buy the house back from you. I couldn't believe it. You think you can just buy everything? That's not how this works anymore. Lorraine stepped forward, trying to soften her tone, but the manipulation was still there. We're just trying to help you, Christy. We want what's best for you. I shook my head, stepping back from the door. No, what you want is control. I'm done. I'm done letting you decide for me. Silas glared at me, fists clenched. You're making a mistake, and you'll regret this. And then they left, just like that. The door slammed behind them, and I stood there, my heart racing. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the crushing weight of their expectations. I felt free, but I knew this was only the beginning. The next day, I made the call to the lawyer. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me into giving up. Not after everything I had done. The lawyer was supportive, explaining the legal steps I would need to take to protect my ownership of the house. I wasn't sure what exactly my family had in mind, but I knew I had to be prepared for anything. As I worked through the paperwork, the reality of what I was doing began to set in. This wasn't just about the house. It was about protecting myself from them, all of them. I could feel the weight of their manipulation in everything they had done to me over the years, and I wasn't going to let it continue. I was taking control of my own destiny, no matter how difficult the fight was. The more I worked on the legal documents, the more empowered I felt. This was my future now, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. That night, I sat on the floor of the living room, a glass of wine in hand, looking at the progress. The house was starting to feel like mine. Every new coat of paint, every fixture I installed, was a statement. I was here, and I was building something for myself. But there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Was I really doing this for me, or was I just trying to prove a point to my family? I closed my eyes and thought about it. The truth was, I had been trying to prove my worth to them for so long. But now, I realized that wasn't why I was doing this. I was doing this for me. I stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the night sky. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. The family I had fought so hard to belong to had rejected me, but now, I was reclaiming my life. And no one was going to take it away from me. The next morning, Rachel showed up at my door. Rachel had always been one of those people who could read you without even saying a word. And when she saw the look on my face, she didn't say anything at first. She just hugged me. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. You've got this. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. Rachel sat with me for hours, helping me go over the paperwork. She believed in me when no one else did. Her support was everything. It was the first time in a long time I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. This house wasn't just a structure, it was the start of something new. A fresh start. A chance to rebuild not just my life, but who I was. And with Rachel's support, I felt like I could do anything. As I signed the last of the paperwork, the reality hit me. This was it. I wasn't just buying a house, I was buying my freedom, my future, and my own story. I had spent so many years trying to prove my worth to the wrong people. Now, it was time to prove my worth to myself. The house felt more like home every day. Each room, each wall, was a symbol of my strength and transformation. It was my sanctuary now. A place where I could breathe freely, without the suffocating presence of my family's control. The weight of their expectations, their demands, was no longer hanging over me. I had taken the first step toward owning my life, and the house was my first victory. But there were moments when the silence of the house became unbearable. I'd sit in the kitchen, sipping coffee, and stare out the window, wondering what my life would be like if I didn't have to fight so hard for every inch of peace. It wasn't just the house that I had to reclaim. It was my dignity, my place in this world. I started seeing Dr. Waller a few months ago. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect. Therapy wasn't something I'd ever considered, not when my family had always told me to just get over it or move on. But here, in the stillness of my new life, I realized I couldn't keep moving without dealing with the past. Dr. Waller was a soft-spoken woman, but she had a way of making me feel like she truly understood the mess that was inside my head. Today, as I sat on her leather couch, I could feel the tension in my shoulders. We were talking about my family again. I had spent so many years trying to earn their approval, but every time I thought I had their love, it slipped right through my fingers. "You've made great progress, Christy," Dr. Waller said, her voice gentle but firm. "But there's still a lot to work through. You're not just fighting them anymore. You're fighting the parts of yourself that you've been trained to believe." I took a deep breath. I know, I've been fighting for their love. But now, I need to fight for myself. Her smile was small but knowing. "Exactly. You're learning to separate what's theirs from what's yours." I felt a surge of determination rise up in me. She was right. All my life, I had lived under the weight of their expectations. But now, I was learning to live for myself. The house was a part of that. It wasn't just a physical space, it was the first step toward rebuilding the life I had always deserved. A few days later, the knock on my door was unexpected. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened it, I was met with the last people I ever thought I'd see here, Lorraine and Silas. They stood there, looking like they'd just walked out of a bad dream. Lorraine had that familiar air of superiority about her, while Silas's cold expression was almost too much to bear. They hadn't changed. "Christy," Lorraine said, her voice dripping with faux concern, "we need to talk. You've made a mistake with this house. It's not too late to fix it." I felt a tightness in my chest. My first instinct was to slam the door in their faces, but instead, I stood there, staring at them. "I'm not selling," I said, my voice steady. "You don't get to make that decision anymore." Silas sneered, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "This is ridiculous. You've taken everything too far. What's the point of all this? You're only going to hurt yourself." Lorraine stepped forward, her words laced with venom. "You're tearing the family apart, Christy. We've worked so hard to keep this family together, and you're just throwing it all away." Something snapped inside me. I had spent my whole life trying to please them, trying to fit into their narrow definition of what I should be, but not anymore. "You don't get to control me," I said, my voice growing louder. "I'm not the same person I was. I'm not your puppet anymore. I've made my decision." Silas was silent for a moment, then his voice dropped, laced with cold disdain. "You're making a huge mistake. We're offering you a way out." "No," I said, my voice resolute. "This is my life now, and if you can't accept that, then I don't need you in it." They stood there, glaring at me, but I didn't back down. This wasn't their house anymore. It was mine, and I would fight to keep it. The legal notice arrived a week later. I knew it was coming, but that didn't make it any easier to read. My family was trying to take the house from me. They were claiming it was theirs by right and demanding that I sell it back. The words on the paper felt like a slap in the face, but I wasn't going to let them win. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. My heart raced as I read the letter to him, but I kept my voice steady. "I need to fight this," I said. "I'm not backing down," the lawyer reassured me, explaining that we could fight the claim in court. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only option, and I would do whatever it took to protect what was mine. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. I wasn't going to let my family intimidate me into giving up the house. This wasn't just a property, it was my future, my freedom, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. That night, as I sat in the living room, the weight of everything hit me. It felt like I had spent my whole life being manipulated by my family. I thought about everything I had done to earn their love, their approval. But now, I realized that I wasn't fighting for them anymore. I was fighting for me. I looked around the room, the house now filled with my belongings, my choices. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged here, like I was finally home. The phone rang, and I glanced at the caller ID. It was Rachel. I picked it up, feeling a rush of relief wash over me. "Hey," she said, her voice bright. "How's everything going?" I let out a breath, then answered. "I'm fighting back, Rachel. They're trying to take the house from me, but I'm not going to let them." There was a pause on the other end. "Good. You deserve this, Christy. You've worked so hard for this, and you're not going to let them take it from you." I smiled, feeling a surge of hope. Rachel's support meant everything. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. A few days later, I sat in my house, my thoughts spinning. I had taken so many steps to get here, but I knew this battle was far from over. My family wouldn't give up easily, but neither would I. I was done letting them control my life. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their love. Now, I was ready to fight for something greater, my freedom. The days felt longer now. Each morning, I woke up in my house, but it wasn't the same house anymore. It had become more than just a roof over my head. It was a battleground. The air was thick with tension, but something in me had shifted. I was no longer the person who let others dictate my life. I wasn't going to back down, no matter how much my family pushed. I had spent too many years letting them manipulate me, but I was done with that. The weight of everything, the legal threats, the constant emotional turmoil, and the fear of losing everything had all been building up. But now, with each passing day, I felt something different. A strength I hadn't known existed within me was rising to the surface. I wasn't going to let them win. I was going to fight for what was mine. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the legal papers in front of me. The words on the page were a reminder of how far I had come, and how far I still had to go. My lawyer had told me that the case could drag on for months, maybe even years, but it didn't matter. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to give up this house. It was more than just a property to me. It was a symbol of my independence. It was the one thing I had left that was entirely mine. Rachel had been a rock for me through all of this. Every time I felt like I was losing my grip, she was there, offering encouragement and support. But I knew it was time for me to step up on my own. I couldn't keep relying on her. I had to be the one to take charge of my own future. Then, the unexpected happened. One morning, just as I was preparing for another day of legal battles, I received an email from Lorraine. The subject line was simple: settlement offer. I hesitated before opening it, but the contents left me stunned. Lorraine and Silas were offering me a large sum of money to drop the case and sell the house back to them. It was as if they were trying to buy my silence, to erase me from their lives once and for all. I read the email several times, feeling the anger rise in my chest. They thought they could just throw money at me and make everything go away, but they didn't know me. They didn't understand that this wasn't about the money. This was about my dignity, my life. I wasn't some pawn in their game anymore. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. I needed to get his thoughts on this. "They're offering me a settlement," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "but I don't think I should accept it. It feels wrong." "Christy," he said, his tone measured, "it's a tactic. They're trying to buy your silence, to avoid the embarrassment of a public court case. You have every right to reject it." I was already sure of my decision, but hearing him confirm it made me feel even more resolute. I wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just about a house, it was about taking control of my own life, once and for all. The next few days were a blur. I spent hours researching the legalities, meeting with my lawyer, and preparing for the battle ahead. But despite my determination, the weight of it all began to take its toll. The stress, the constant pressure from my family, and the fear of losing everything, it all came crashing down on me one night. I had been sitting on the couch, flipping through the case files, when the panic hit. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I tried to push it away, to keep going, but it was too much. I dropped the papers and sat there, frozen, feeling like I was drowning in the weight of everything. I hadn't felt like this in a long time. The old feelings of insecurity, the doubts, the constant need to prove myself, it all came rushing back. I wanted to be strong, to keep pushing forward, but in that moment, I felt completely broken. It wasn't until Rachel showed up at my door that I snapped out of it. She found me sitting on the floor of the living room, my head in my hands. "Christy," she said, kneeling beside me. "What's going on?" I shook my head, unable to speak. The flood of emotions was overwhelming. I had been trying so hard to hold everything together, to fight for this house, for my future, but it was all too much. Rachel didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside me, offering her silent support. And in that silence, I felt the weight of the past few months. The betrayal, the manipulation, the constant pressure it had been eating away at me. Finally, I spoke. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. I've been fighting so hard, but what if I'm not strong enough?" Rachel's voice was soft, but firm. "You're stronger than you know, Christy. You've already come so far. Don't let them win. You're not alone in this." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't alone. I had Rachel. I had my lawyer. And I had myself. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of clarity. The panic had faded, replaced with a quiet determination. I wasn't going to let this moment break me. I had come too far. The house, my home, was a symbol of everything I had worked for. I spent the day focusing on myself physically and mentally. I went for a long walk, clearing my mind, and then I spent an hour meditating, letting go of the tension that had built up. As the days passed, I felt myself regaining control. I wasn't just fighting for the house anymore. I was fighting for my future, for my freedom. I wasn't going to let my family tear me down anymore. They had controlled me for too long, but not anymore. The fight was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came next. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their love. Now, I was ready to fight for something greater, my freedom. The weight of it all had settled into my bones. I could feel it. This was the moment everything would change. I had fought so hard for this house, for my future, for my life. But as much as I tried to ignore the gnawing sense of urgency, I knew deep down that the stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. The legal battles, the emotional toll, the constant pressure from my family, it was all building to a tipping point. Sitting in my living room, the papers scattered in front of me, I could see it more clearly than ever. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about my identity, my independence. I had come so far, but it felt like my family wasn't going to let go without a fight. They wanted to break me, but I was done running. Rachel and I had spent the last few weeks in a whirlwind. She had helped me craft the statement, the one that would finally show the world who I really was. I had to stand tall now, show the media, show my family, that I was no longer their puppet. I typed out the final draft, my fingers flying over the keys. Every word was a reminder of how far I had come, and how far I still had to go. I wasn't the same person who had walked away from this family all those months ago. I was stronger now, clearer in my purpose. My public statement was more than just an explanation. It was a declaration, a stand for everything I believed in. Rachel stood by my side, her hand on my shoulder as we finalized everything. "You're ready for this," she said, her voice steady and confident. "You've got this." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. This was the moment. The press conference was set. I would take back control over my narrative. No more hiding, no more playing by their rules. This was my fight, and I was going to win. The media reaction was swift. The headlines hit faster than I could have imagined. The next morning, I found myself plastered across the news, my face staring back at me from every outlet. But it wasn't the version of me I recognized. The media had already twisted my words. They painted me as an ungrateful daughter, a woman so consumed by her own greed that she was willing to destroy her family's legacy for a house. I felt the sting deep in my chest as I watched Lorraine and Silas speak to reporters, their faces twisted into masks of false concern. They were experts at playing the victim, manipulating the story to make themselves look like the wounded parties. Lorraine's voice was dripping with faux sympathy, while Silas stood beside her, the same cold detachment in his eyes that I had come to know all too well. They brought in a family expert to back up their claims, painting me as unstable, as the problem child who was destroying everything they had worked for. The expert described me as a woman on the brink of a breakdown, desperate for attention, and seeking revenge against a family who had only tried to help her. The lies were thick and suffocating. My stomach churned with disgust as I watched the broadcast. I had prepared myself for this, but it didn't make it any easier. They had no shame, no empathy. They were willing to say anything, do anything, to control the narrative. And for a moment, I questioned everything. Had I made the right choice? Was I really the villain in their story? But then, something inside me clicked. I wasn't the villain. I was the one who had been wronged. They weren't going to get away with this. I wasn't going to let them. It was just as I was stewing in my anger that I overheard a conversation that would change everything. I was sitting in my office, talking to Rachel on the phone, when I heard my lawyer talking to someone outside my door. I couldn't make out the words at first, but something about the tone made my blood run cold. I stood up and approached the door, just enough to hear him say, "Yes, I've spoken to them. I think it's time we settle this." My heart sank. I pushed the door open, and my lawyer looked up, startled. "Christy," he began, trying to hide his nervousness. Who are you talking to?" I demanded, my voice low but sharp. He swallowed. "It's nothing. Just some business." "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "What's going on?" He hesitated for a moment before finally admitting, "I've been in talks with your family, trying to find a way to settle this without going to trial." My world tilted on its axis. My lawyer, the one person I had trusted to fight by my side, had been talking to them behind my back. He had been working with Lorraine and Silas to mediate a settlement. I felt betrayed. The one person I thought was on my side had been playing both sides. "You're working for them, aren't you?" I whispered, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. "No," he said quickly. "I'm just doing my job. I'm trying to avoid a lengthy, expensive trial." "No," I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "You're trying to sell me out." I grabbed my purse and walked to the door, not looking back. I had trusted him, but that trust had been shattered in an instant. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, reeling from the betrayal. But by the time the evening rolled around, something inside me had shifted. I couldn't let this break me. I couldn't let them win. Rachel was there, as always. She helped me through the shock, sitting with me in silence as I processed everything. And then, with her help, I found a new lawyer. Someone who understood what I was going through and who was willing to fight for me, not for a settlement. I had started to rebuild, piece by piece. My trust in people was shattered, but my trust in myself was growing stronger. This fight wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about reclaiming everything I had lost. It was about standing up for myself, no matter what. The next day, as I sat in my new lawyer's office, a new wave of energy surged through me. I had been knocked down, but I was far from defeated. I wasn't going to let my family control the narrative anymore. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, a distant relative I hadn't heard from in years called me. They had information that could change everything. "They've been involved in illegal activities," my relative told me, their voice low, careful. "They were trying to sell the house under false pretenses." My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. This was the break I needed. With this new ally, I could finally see a way to win. But would it be enough to stop them? I sat in my living room, staring at the papers spread out before me. The weight of the upcoming court battle loomed over me like a storm cloud. But there was no turning back now. This was it, the final showdown. My family had pushed me to this point, and now I was ready to face them head-on. Rachel had been a constant support through all of this. She was the one person I could rely on, and today was no different. She sat beside me, her presence grounding, as I mentally prepared for the court date in just a few days. "You're going to do great," Rachel said, offering a warm smile. I nodded, but inside, I was a whirlwind of emotions. The fear, the anger, the uncertainty, it all swirled together. But one thing was clear. I was determined to fight. I wasn't just defending my home. I was defending my right to exist without manipulation, to live life on my own terms. My new lawyer, Catherine, was also preparing me for what was to come. She had outlined the strategy, the evidence we would present, and how we would counter every move Lorraine and Silas made. Catherine was sharp, strategic, and nothing like my previous lawyer. She had my back, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had someone truly fighting for me. "We have everything we need," Catherine said as she looked over the final details. This is our moment. The pressure was immense. The battle had dragged on for months, but now, it was all coming to a head. I wasn't just fighting for the house anymore, I was fighting for my dignity, my self-worth, and I wasn't about to let my family take that from me. Lorraine and Silas were never ones to back down easily, and they proved it yet again. The night before the trial, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. They were desperate, and I could feel it. Offer her a settlement, Silas had said, his voice low and menacing. Tell her we'll give her a good amount of money if she drops this case. Lorraine's voice followed, calm and calculating. We can't let her win. Not after all we've done for her. I froze, hidden just out of sight. The audacity. They were willing to bribe my new lawyer, offer me money to abandon everything I had worked for, and the worst part? They thought it would work. I was furious, my heart racing with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. The idea of selling out, of giving in, had never been an option for me. I had come too far. I had endured too much. No amount of money would make me forget the betrayal. The next morning, I confronted Catherine. They're trying to bribe you, I said, my voice tight with anger. Are you going to take their money? Catherine was silent for a moment, her face hardening. No, she finally said. We fight, Christy. We're not going to let them control this. And just like that, my resolve hardened. I was going through with this trial, no matter what. The trial itself was nothing like I had imagined. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. Lorraine and Silas were their usual selves, cold and calculating. But I could see the cracks beginning to show. They knew they were losing control, and that only made them more dangerous. Then, just when I thought the case couldn't get any more intense, Catherine dropped the bombshell. We have one final piece of evidence, she said, her voice steady, but there was a fire in her eyes. The courtroom went silent as Catherine handed the judge a document that shattered the facade Lorraine and Silas had carefully crafted. The document detailed their involvement in illegal activities related to the sale of the house. It showed how they had manipulated the legal system, using my absence and lack of knowledge to their advantage. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as the room reacted. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as everyone absorbed the truth. This was it. This was the moment we had all been waiting for. Lorraine and Silas scrambled, their calm exteriors cracking for the first time. They denied everything, tried to discredit the evidence, but it was clear. The tide had turned. The case was slipping away from them, and they knew it. The courtroom seemed to settle into a tense silence, but my mind was racing. I couldn't believe it. I was finally in control. I was finally being heard. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about reclaiming everything they had taken from me. The years of manipulation, the lies, the control. They couldn't take any more of it. I looked around the courtroom, seeing faces that didn't belong to family, but to allies. Catherine, Rachel, my new lawyer, all of them had been there for me, and for the first time, I felt like I was not alone in this fight. But just when I thought I had this in the bag, Lorraine and Silas pulled their final card. They brought in a surprise witness, an old family friend who claimed that I had been a troublemaker my whole life. This person painted me as irresponsible, reckless, someone unfit to own the house. The accusations hit hard, and for a moment, I felt the familiar sting of their judgment. But this time, it was different. I wasn't the scared little girl they used to control. I had worked for everything I had. I had fought for my dignity, for my future. I wasn't going to let them tear that down with lies. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the overwhelming evidence we had against them. This witness's testimony meant nothing. They were just trying to sabotage me, but they weren't going to win. I stayed calm, even though the anger bubbled beneath the surface. The courtroom was on edge as I stood up, my voice steady but firm. This is not who I am, I said. You want to control me, make me seem like a villain, but I'm not the problem here. The moment I spoke, I felt a shift. The power was mine. With the final piece of the puzzle in place, all that was left was to strike the final blow and claim what was rightfully mine. The courtroom was silent as the final moments of the trial began. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears. This was it, the moment I had worked for, fought for, and bled for. The last chance to take back what was rightfully mine. Lorraine and Silas sat across the room, their faces tense and pale, realizing that everything they had built, everything they had manipulated, was crumbling before their eyes. Their usual smugness was gone, replaced by an anxious, almost desperate air. I stood up, the weight of the moment grounding me. My new lawyer, Catherine, had prepared me for this. I could feel her presence beside me, offering a sense of calm that I so desperately needed. The room was focused on me now, every eye on my every movement. "I've been asked why this fight matters," I began, my voice steady and clear. "This isn't just about a house. It's about reclaiming my dignity, my life, and my future." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. I could see Lorraine flinch from across the room. She wasn't used to this. Neither was Silas. They had always controlled the narrative. But not anymore. I was deceived, manipulated by the very people who were supposed to love me. But I'm standing here today to make sure that no one else is ever silenced the way I was. My voice rose, gaining strength. This is my story now, not theirs. As I spoke, I saw Catherine handing the judge the final piece of evidence, undeniable proof of the manipulation that had taken place. The room went dead silent as the judge looked over the document. I could feel the world holding its breath. This was it. Just as I thought things couldn't get more intense, an unexpected voice interrupted the tension in the room. A figure I hadn't noticed before stood up, one of my distant relatives, someone I had never expected to side with me. They spoke, their voice shaking with guilt. "I'm the one who helped forge the documents," they confessed. "I was part of the plan to get the house away from Christy. I've been living with this guilt for years, but I can't do it anymore." The room was in shock. Lorraine and Silas both froze, unable to respond. The betrayal was too deep, too real. This relative wasn't just confessing, they were exposing everything. The lengths to which my family had gone to keep control. For a moment, I was speechless. I had never expected this. But in the same breath, I felt a surge of validation. Everything I had endured, everything I had fought for, was justified. It was over. My family's lies were exposed. The manipulation, the secrecy, the corruption, it was all out in the open now. Catherine, seeing the shift in the room, pounced on the opportunity. "We have one more piece of evidence," she said. "This document shows the fraudulent transfer of the house, signed and sealed under false pretenses, manipulated by Lorraine and Silas to take advantage of Christy's absence." The courtroom buzzed with disbelief. Lorraine and Silas were cornered, their defense crumbling before them. I could see the smirk slowly fade from their faces. The fear was palpable now. They realized they were losing. They had no way out. For the first time in years, I felt the power shift back to me. The anger that had been simmering for so long slowly transformed into something else, something calmer, more controlled. I wasn't just fighting anymore, I was winning. As the judge deliberated, I reflected on everything that had led me to this moment. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn their love, their approval, but today, I realized that it was never about them. It was about me, about reclaiming my power, my voice, my life. The road had been long. The scars were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had fought through the pain, the fear, and the uncertainty. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, piece by piece. And now, standing in this courtroom, I knew that the real victory was not just about the house, it was about who I had become in the process. I could feel the weight lifting, piece by piece. The long years of being silenced, of feeling insignificant, were finally over. The judge returned to the bench, his gavel raised, and the room fell into a hush. "In light of the evidence presented," he began, his voice clear and firm, "the court finds in favor of Christy. Lorraine and Silas have been found guilty of manipulating the legal proceedings to take ownership of the property in question." The words hit me like a wave. It was over. "You are awarded the house and all the assets previously taken from you," the judge continued, his voice ringing with authority. "Lorraine and Silas will face legal repercussions for their actions." For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't stop the smile that crept across my face. Lorraine and Silas didn't speak. They simply stood and left the courtroom, their heads low, their faces filled with defeat. I remained standing, my head held high. The weight of my victory settled into my bones, but I knew deep down that this was only the beginning of my new life. As I walked out of the courtroom, the weight that had been pressing on me for so long finally lifted. But I knew my journey wasn't over. There was still much more to rebuild. Standing in my new home, I finally took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The weight of the past few months had lifted, but there was no mistaking the exhaustion that still lingered in my chest. The courtroom battle was behind me, but the real work had only just begun. Moving forward wasn't as simple as winning the house. It was about reclaiming my life. I had done it. I had fought, but there was so much more to rebuild. I looked around, taking in the walls that were now mine. I could almost hear the echoes of everything that had happened here. The anger, the frustration, the fear. But now, there was peace. Real peace. Not the kind I had hoped for from others, but the kind I had created for myself. Rachel and a few other close friends had come over to celebrate with me. We shared stories, laughed, and, for once, it wasn't about the past or the struggle, it was about the future. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel hope. As I sat there, the phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a message from Catherine, my lawyer. "Congratulations, Christy! You did it! You're finally free!" I smiled, but something in the back of my mind whispered that this victory was only half the battle. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened it, standing before me was someone I hadn't expected. Aunt Linda, a distant relative who had stayed quiet throughout the trial. "Christy," she began, her voice calm but hesitant. "I just wanted to come by and apologize. I know I didn't speak up sooner, and I regret that. I've known about everything what they did to you, but I stayed silent." Her words, at first, caught me off guard. I had spent so many years hoping for a moment like this, a moment of reconciliation, of peace. But as I looked at her face, something felt off. Her words didn't feel entirely genuine. It was as if she were trying to make up for something, but at what cost? "I didn't come empty-handed," she continued, her voice still soft. "I have something that could be helpful. A portion of the assets that were taken from you. It's not much, but I froze. The offer was tempting, but then the weight of it hit me. She hadn't been in the courtroom. She had stayed hidden in the shadows while my battle raged. Now, she was offering me something, but why? Was it out of guilt? Or was she hoping for something in return? The questions swirled in my mind. I couldn't help but feel uneasy. I looked her in the eyes and took a step back. "Thank you, Aunt Linda, but I've fought for what's mine. I don't need anything from you. Not anymore." I closed the door gently, my heart heavy. The old dynamics hadn't changed. The trust I had so desperately wanted to rebuild wasn't there. Not with her, not with anyone in my family. The past had its grip on me, but it wouldn't control me anymore. The next day, as I tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, an unexpected offer came through. A message from a prominent company, offering me a lucrative position. It was tempting, more than tempting. It was everything I had worked for. It could open doors I never imagined possible. But the catch was clear. It would take me far away from everything I had rebuilt here. Away from the peace, away from my home, and away from my new life. I couldn't deny the allure. The idea of being more than I had ever been was seductive. But as I sat with the offer, I felt the weight of the decision bearing down on me. Could I leave behind everything I had fought so hard to create for the sake of a promise of something more? I spent hours pacing, torn between two lives, one that felt solid, secure, and newly built, and another that could bring greater rewards. But at what cost? Rachel, ever the anchor, had been through it all with me. I called her, my voice filled with uncertainty. "What do you think I should do?" Her reply was simple, yet profound. "Christy, you've worked so hard to get here. If it's something you really want, then go for it. But don't forget what you've already built. Don't lose yourself in the stare. Pursuit of something bigger." Her words lingered in my mind, but even as I sat with them, I knew the decision wouldn't be easy. I had to choose what was right for me, even if I couldn't see the full picture yet. A few days later, I made my decision. I wouldn't let my past or my family hold me hostage anymore. I decided to confront the emotional scars that still haunted me. Lorraine and Silas had lost in court, but I still needed closure. I couldn't truly move forward until I faced the last remnants of them. I walked into their old house, the place that had once been a prison to me. It wasn't the house that mattered now, it was the people. The confrontation wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the last piece of me they had taken, the peace of mind to finally walk away without looking back. They were there, waiting for me. Lorraine looked as though she might crumble under the weight of the moment, while Silas seemed to shrink, as if trying to hide from the mess they had created. "You took everything from me," I said, my voice steady, "but you won't take my peace. Not anymore." The words echoed in the room, and for a moment, it was like a weight lifted. I wasn't asking for their forgiveness. I wasn't even trying to make them understand. I was finally letting go. I was free. But just as I turned to leave, something stopped me. A small piece of information slipped into my hands. Another betrayal. Another small act of treachery from someone I trusted. My world spun. The anger I thought was gone flooded back, fresh and painful. Another betrayal. I had been right to keep my distance. But now, I understood something. This was the last time. I didn't need their approval, their love, or their lies. I wasn't going to be held down by them anymore. As I walked away from the shattered pieces of my past, I realized that the most powerful thing I could do now was choose who I wanted to be without their shadow hanging over me.